Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking to Doug Shapiro. He's a candidate for the 29th Council District to replace Karen Koslowitz, who's term limited. The district represents neighbourhoods such as Kew Gardens and Forest Hills. Hi Doug, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you.
Oh, terrific. So listen, Doug, you're obviously, a long-time resident here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for office?
Yes, absolutely. Born and raised in Forest Hills, moved back to the area a couple of years ago. I live in Kew Gardens now with my wife, love of my life, Kylie, and our dog, Nala. Why I'm running? I'm running because District 29 and the city really need a moral budget.
Mm-hmm.
What do I mean by moral budget? I mean a budget that really focuses on increasing our funding in healthcare and education. Too often, our city emphasizes tackling the symptoms of the issues that we face and not the root causes. And so I'm excited to talk to you today about more what I mean about a moral budget and how that specifically applies for our community in Richmond Hill, Kew Gardens, Forest Hills, and Regal Park.
Mm-hmm. Okay, terrific. So just tell us a little bit about, your involvement on a community level in terms of civic engagement. Clearly, you've got Forest Hills in the blood, having grown up here and now living in Kew Gardens. But tell us a little bit more about your activities on a local level.
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents have lived in Forest Hills almost 40 years. Currently I try to stay very involved with Community Board 6,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Community Board 9. I live kind of right on the border there.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about local issues, artificial political boundaries can't stop us from, achieving the best that we can for our community. So I try to go to both of those meetings. I'm also involved with some support for refugees. I work with a family, the Central American family that lives in Briarwood, and this is in collaboration with the Reformed Temple of Forest Hills,
Mm-hmm.
which has a very kind of robust social justice program. I was bar mitzvahed there many years ago. So I do try to kind of keep my ear to the ground and hear what's going on with the community. And those are three kind of formal ways that I do that.
Okay, terrific. Let's moving on to some sort of topics that have been big in the district in the last sort of year, and probably will continue to be so. One is Kew Gardens and the jail concept. It was approved by the council, with the backing of Karen Koslowitz. Do you think that that project should continue, the borough-based jail concept, and building a facility, in Kew Gardens?
No, it shouldn't continue. This is a tremendous mistake. It's a $9 billion mistake.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be building schools in our community, not jails. We need to be building hospitals in our community, not jails. We need to be rehabilitating hospitals that have since shuttered in our community since 2009, not build new jails.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are many problems with current jails at Rikers. There's obviously been human rights abuses that have taken place there.
Mm-hmm.
But those human rights abuses they're not perpetrated by the bricks on Rikers, right? They're by humans. And so what we need instead is a robust training and retraining of folks that are going to be working with people that are incarcerated. There's one thing that I understand, I think that we should all understand about criminal justice in our society. And this goes back to kind of the mid-90s. If we build new jails in America, we somehow find a way to fill it with people. So I'm against building new jails, full stop. We should not be building jails. We are zapping our next generation, usually of young Black and brown people, of their potential by building new jails. We know that disproportionately Black and brown folks are going to be ending up in the jail system. And so we absolutely should not be having community-based jails. We need to have fewer jail cells, not more jail cells.
Just to interrupt you, Doug, would you close the facilities on Rikers Island then? Or are you sort of saying, hey, listen, we should rebuild them or we should revamp them? What are you kind of saying there?
Yeah, I'm agnostic about facilities. It's clearly there's been under maintenance in that area, but I think the more important issue that we really think about is the trend in the incarcerated population, and we need to be reducing the number of incarcerated people, not keeping that stable, not increasing that number.
Right.
And so anything that we can do to be moving in that direction, I think we should. And building new jails is going to be moving us further away from that direction. It zaps people of their moral dignity, of their economic dignity, of their ability to become productive members of society. And too often we are seeing folks stuck stuck being incarcerated for nonviolent crimes or offenses.
But you wouldn't rule out not closing Rikers. Is that what you're saying to me? Or are you advocating for closing Rikers and not building another jail?
Yeah, so I don't know how realistic it would be to fully close Rikers, immediately. I think there is a place for, we do want to keep violent folks off our streets. We do want to keep our neighborhoods safe. And so it's not clear to me, where folks that have committed violent offenses would go if we were to fully close Rikers. I don't think building whole new structures directly in our community is the way to go, though.
Okay, no, that answers it sufficiently. Okay, now another issue, of course, that's been big in Kew Gardens, Forest Hills, etc., is phase 4 of the Queens Boulevard redesign. It was approved quite some time ago and it's sort of got nowhere for various reasons. I guess the latest reason is COVID-19, but even then it was delayed for who knows what. No one knows why, or publicly anyway. What are your thoughts on that in terms of completing it? What would you like to see happen there?
Yeah. So if we just take a step back and think about, the demographics of the District 29, tends to be older district relative to the rest of New York City. And when we think about transportation options in the community, there's really kind of two areas that I think we need to be emphasizing as areas that we focus on. And so first is accessibility, and second is safety. And if a new project or an existing project is not going to make sure that that we have equal accessibility to a transportation option, and we're sure that the new transportation option is safe for all folks in our community, even folks that maybe have some mobility issues, we shouldn't continue pursuing it. We're still very far away from Vision Zero, right, under the de Blasio administration. Usually adding more congestion on Queens Boulevard is probably going to take us further away from that Vision Zero. So if you actually look around our community, very few people are biking at the moment. The folks that are on vehicles, two-wheel vehicles, tend to be folks on more like on mopeds. So folks that are potentially traveling for a job. So, it's still unclear whether the project is going to move forward. If we can move forward in a way that ensures that we are making sure that folks have equal access to the new transportation options, and we can ensure that we can do it in a safe way, we should move forward. But if it's going to add more complexity, in certain areas, in certain intersections, we don't want to get back to where we were in 2000, where we were at the Boulevard of Death. So I think we need to be careful as we move forward. We can move forward, but I think we need to move forward with caution.
Yeah, I'm just sort of struggling to get my head around what you're saying there. You're saying then that phase 4, maybe we don't carry it out the way that it's been proposed, that it should be amended somewhat, or it should be restudied. Can you just sort of help me out a little bit there?
No, I don't. So I don't think we need a restudy. I think the issue has been studied quite extensively. All I'm saying is that as we move forward with the implementation, we need to be hearing, especially from older folks who I think sometimes are threatened from a safety perspective about what potentially more vehicles on the road, more density and more multimodal forms of transportation means for them, means for the pedestrian, right? So I think we need to be careful about that.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Rezoning, it's a big topic throughout New York City, but it's becoming more relevant here in this district. You've got a project going up, or planned to go up, in Rego Park on the corner of Austin Street and was it 69th? What are your thoughts on, that project and, other projects that are coming up potentially on Queens Boulevard? If you were to be council member.
Yeah. So I think we have to be, really clear-eyed about the trade-off between density and cost of living. And so I think sometimes these are two different issues in folks' heads, but they're directly connected. Mm-hmm. So if we want more affordable housing, we want the ability for folks at all income levels to be able to live at a reasonable cost in the city. We need to increase density. There's no getting away from that.
Right.
That said, when we do increase density, we need to make sure the infrastructure can support it. So, in the medium term, right, we do need to increase density because ultimately, I think we don't want to be crowding folks out that are middle income and lower middle income from living in our neighborhood. So I think it's an important project. I think it should move forward. Recognize at the city level, especially since the last recession, the supply of housing has not caught up to the demand. Even with the pandemic, if you look at prices in central Queens, prices across greater Queens, they actually haven't changed very much as a result of the pandemic, when you might expect that they, for instance, have go down. They haven't changed. And so supply has not caught up to the demand and has not caught up to the job creation that had occurred prior to the pandemic from 2009 to 2019. Mm-hmm. So we need to be clear-eyed about that and say, yes, we accept more density because it's going to lead to lower cost of living for folks.
All right. Okay. Another topic, of course, is the NYPD. There was a city budget. There was a lot of back and forth as to how much it should be reduced. How would you go about, a city budget with the NYPD in terms of looking at the NYPD, and what changes do you think need to be made to that agency?
Yeah. So let me first say off, the city council and the mayor have dropped the ball in this racial justice movement and moment. They have not met the demands of vast majority of folks in our district and across the city. And so their quote unquote cut to police funding was not a real cut. Mm-hmm. It was some accounting chicanery, if you will. And most of the quote unquote cuts are non-binding. So if we just look at the numbers, I'm a budget nerd. I spent most of my career thinking about finances at the International Monetary Fund as a federal consultant for SNAP projects. And if we actually look at the budget, the police department is the only agency that's seen its budget grow year over year the last several years, the only one. And it seems no matter what is going on from the finance perspective in the city, that's one thing that you can somehow bet on, that the police department budget will grow. And so when I talk about a moral budget, I mean, we need to be thinking about the long-term investments that are going to give us the highest return on investment to improve the quality of life of our city. Mm-hmm. And putting more and more resources into the police budget long-term is not going to be the best bang for our buck in improving the quality of life for our city. So what I'd like to see is really taking a hard look, not just at the NYPD budget, but across every agency. And we need to be asking ourselves, can we deliver efficient services to our folks? Mm-hmm. And we need to compare, for instance, spending money, in the police budget with something that we know would give us a very high investment. What do I mean by that? Well, we know that when we invest in education, especially elementary education, it's a tremendous return on investment for society. Mm-hmm. We tend to see folks with higher incomes over time. We tend to see folks that are healthier over time. And we tend to see more productive tax-paying citizens as a result of our investment in education, especially elementary education. So we need to be thinking about how we can move toward a more moral budget that is emphasizing investments in education and in healthcare. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, I hear you. In terms of schools in the district, obviously you went to school in the neighborhood, public school. What do you think could be done in terms of, getting more school seats in the district? And what do you think about push out there to desegregate schools right now?
Yeah. So first question, I think it's very important that we build additional capacity in our district, especially in a few grades, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. There's a bulge of students in these grade levels in our community. I hear that from parents. So we know, there's not many things that the whole education community agrees on, but one thing they do agree on is when we reduce student to teacher population ratios, quality of education for students goes up. If we're able to kind of bend that from 30 students per teacher, or even 35 students to teacher, bend that down to 25, 22 per teacher, we know that outcomes for our students go up. So there's a couple things that we could be doing. We need to be hiring more teachers directly in our community and directly in our existing elementary and middle schools. And the second thing is we need to be building capacity. So when schooling moves towards a kind of more back to normal, hopefully by next fall, we have the capacity to be sitting, kids in potentially a new environment to accommodate the lower student to teacher population ratios. Right. The second question around diversity, I went to PS 196, was a very diverse school when I went there. I went to Halsey Junior High School, was a very diverse school when I went there. Went to Stuyvesant High School, was a very diverse school when I went there. The kids I grew up with and I'm still friends with, were sons and daughters of Moroccan immigrants, Israeli immigrants, Cuban immigrants, Indian immigrants, Pakistani immigrants, Russian immigrants. And I think that my life has been enriched and education has been really enriched by being in integrated schools for my entire public schooling in New York City. So although this integration plan has kind of sputtered, I do think that the underlying direction is moving in the right direction. The issue is the way that the DOE went about implementing it. So the DOE was not very transparent in the process. I went to multiple District 28 discussion meetings, and there are people who are very angry on both sides of the issue. And I think part of the reason for that is that there wasn't enough outreach. There wasn't enough outreach between the DOE and the community, and there was not enough transparency in terms of who would be actually on this coordinating committee to make recommendations about the plan. So I do support kind of the broad outlines of that plan. I do think it will be contribute to a more enriching and improve educational outcomes for all demographics. And I think maybe the DOE needs to be taking a more diplomatic approach if they choose to kind of move forward with that in the future.
Right. Okay. Now, a big component, of course, in terms of being a council member is dealing with the community board or community boards. How would you go about appointing new members to the board? Community Board 6 especially. Yeah.
So community board appointments are really a broken process. I agree with the idea of term limits. What I think is a very simple thing that we can do is there should be direct outreach, at least one direct outreach via mail to every household in the community, and saying, explain what is the community board, how can you go about applying for the community board, because right now it's essentially an inside baseball system. It's old boys club is not really the right word because there's diversity in gender on the community boards, but it is like an old boys club. If you know the right person, you shake the right hand, you're more likely to be on a community board. And so it's not demographically, community board 6, unfortunately, is not reflective of the community. Right. It doesn't have, there's not many young people on the community board. There's not many people of color on community board 6. So it doesn't reflect demographically what's going on in the community. The community boards can be much larger as well. There's an artificial number cap of people that we have on a community board. And the community boards, I think, have effectively shown, both 6, 9, and others, that they are able to have effective meetings over Zoom. So even if someone is on a community board and they're not physically able to be there in person, we shouldn't be barring additional people who want to be involved with the issues closest to them, closest to affecting themselves and their families. We should not be barring them due to an artificial number of people on the community board.
Do you think? So there's. Sorry, Doug. Carry on, Doug.
No, please.
No, I mean, so in terms of appointments, how would you actually go about it then?
I don't think that there needs to be such a appointment system. I think if you want to be on the community board, you should be on the community board. I don't think that's going to lead to community boards of 500 people. I think maybe at the most that's going to double the size of most community boards. I think people feel left out of the process. And if the idea of the community board is to bring the city government closer to the people, why are we making it such a difficult process for people to get through?
Right. I guess if they can prove that they're residents of the area or work in the area, then they meet those enough. If they meet those eligibility requirements, you're basically saying, hey, listen, go ahead, be on the board. You're the first to say that concept, to present that concept, and it's a very interesting one, I got to say. What would you do differently moving on? What would you do differently in terms of what Karen Koslowitz has done, in her period as councilperson?
Yes. So, Karen Koslowitz, she's a legend in the community. I think she's done a lot of great things for the community. I think over the last few years, she's maybe lost her way a little bit. I think she is probably not acted independently enough from the city council speaker and the current mayor. And of course, the biggest issue that she is of the community, both Community Board 6 and Community Board 9, and many, many other people not on the community boards, was to vote for borough-based jails. She believed it's a good negotiation. She got she believed she was a good negotiator when she received 2 murals underneath 71st Continental and an additional 2 police officers for the 112th district in exchange for a very large jail in our community. And this was essentially political capitulation for the community. So it's a massive mistake. And she's done a lot of wonderful things over the last 29 years, almost 30 years for the community as a deputy borough president and a city council member, but she hasn't been listening to the community in the last few years. And so let me give you some specific things that the next city council person needs to do better. Next city council person needs to be holding office hours 6 or 7 days and nights a week. The next city council, meaning if you are not able to make the existing office hours, that city council person needs to be going directly to your home. If you can't make it digitally for whatever reason, we need to be reaching out directly to anyone in the community that has a problem. Second thing, we need to be building better relationships with a number of agencies in the community. So many times I've talked to voters that are so frustrated that they're not able to get simple things done, for instance, by the Department of Transportation. Small things, small pothole fixes, an addition of a speed bump, putting up a stop sign. That's something that local political representation has failed the community on. The additional thing that we need to be doing is we need to be speaking with one voice. What do I mean by that? if you think about Central Queens and you think about the level of resources that we give into the city versus the level of resources we receive back from the city, Queens is a net donor to New York City. Central Queens is a net donor to New York City. New York City is a net donor to Albany. New York State is a net donor to the federal government. So we need better coordination between the next city council person and our folks, our representatives in Albany, to make sure that under new administration that we're receiving the proper federal funding for our community, that we're receiving proper state funding for our community. Because right now we're really contributing more than we're getting back from all levels of government.
Okay. Now, Doug, just to finish up, are there any particular issues or topics that you're really going to look at hard and say, these are going to be my projects that I really want to see, come to this district, or change that I think New Yorkers should see? Are there any things like that that you really have a strong passion for, that you would like to bring particular change to?
Yeah. So I'll go back to the moral budget. And with the moral budget, what does that mean concretely in terms of projects in the community? A couple of things, right? One, Parkway Hospital has sat there for basically 11 years now. You walk by it, it can be so many different things that would be wonderful for the community, and has just sat there. That could be rehabilitated. We clearly suffered through a traumatic year, and we have another few months to get through COVID until a vaccine is widely disseminated for everyone, both our frontline workers and the broader population. We have to really think, why do we not have the emergency bed capacity in Queens? Well, it was because 3 hospitals closed in 2009 due to financial issues. So this is us not investing long-term way back then in 2009 in healthcare, and seeing the consequences of that action, really horrible consequence of that action many years later. So we could rehabilitate Parkway Hospital. Perhaps that could be a community center. Perhaps that can be additional capacity for elementary and or middle schools. Perhaps, that can be restored to provide healthcare services. So that's the first thing I'd like to see. Second thing I'd like to see is additional capacity again for the elementary and middle schools. I really can't emphasize this enough. I'm born to 2 teachers. My wife has been a teacher. I think education is really key to solving so many of the deep-seated issues that our city and society face. When we are able to reduce the student-to-teacher population ratio, we know that there are higher quality outcomes for our youngest and brightest. So those are 2 kind of specific areas that I think we can start thinking about immediately. And we can accomplish, and let me be clear, we cannot accomplish any of that if we continue along the same path, if we continue along the same budget path that we have been under the de Blasio administration. So only with a moral budget will we really be able to start healing together as a community.
All right. Well, Doug, on that note, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. Really appreciate your time and opportunity to speak with you and your viewers.